Hello and welcome to Business First TV. Today I have Ian Knowlson with me. Ian is a renowned global thought leader when it comes to the future of work. And as we know in current times with COVID, I really wanted to bring him on so he could offer his advice on what we can do as businesses, large organizations, and anybody looking to really change how they work and how their company works. Ian can offer some great advice in this arena. And Ian, I offer it over to you and allow you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, Sam. My name's Ian Knowlson. I've been in business now for 40 odd years. Most of that time has been in the talent acquisition area, recruitment and things like that. And I've been running my own coaching business now for 10 years. 10 years this month.
Wow.
Wow. There you go. Absolutely. So actually, it's officially not really this month. It's officially the 1st of July. But yeah, 10 years ago, I left Hayes this month. So that's what I do. And I'm currently working with, at last count, 35 to 40 executives across the world, coaching them on developing and growing their businesses. So yes, but as you know, as you mentioned, my passion is the future of work, the future of talent. And as you know, I speak at conferences all the time, or I was doing until COVID. So yeah, but I would be delighted to answer any of your clients or your listeners' questions if they've got any. So
absolutely. When we first met, it was exactly that. You had just finished a conference, I believe, for the Rec Expo, and I was blown away at the time of how you were able to predict future markets. And now, as we're here in 2020, what you had said, really has come true in many ways. And so I guess what I brought you on here today for was to kind of let us know what you think we should be looking out for as a business and things that we should have on our periphery when it comes to making decisions for the next 3 to 5 years. Is there any advice that you could give?
Well, I think there are trends that have been happening for several years now that are coming together, and what the COVID global pandemic has done is accelerate some of those trends, either positively or seen situations where business processes and business activities have rescinded and declined. So let me give you something to think about. 250 years ago, in Manchester, which is not more than, as the crow flies, 20 miles from where I'm sitting right now, a revolution took place that transformed the whole of this planet. It was the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. There is a revolution taking place today, which is going to transform the planet. What happened 250 years ago was that was a huge migration that went from the countryside into the cities. The percentage population that suddenly moved from the cities. So by the time we got to around about 1850, 90% of the world's population were living within the major cities. And that still remains the same today. Now, if we could turn the clocks back, people can move and live wherever they want. They can get better quality of life. And they will be taking their earnings and their salaries back into those places. So let's think about what happens. That means that people getting paid London salaries are now living in parts of rural Britain. So they're now spending that money with the local shopkeepers we've gone through this shopping from home exponential bonanza that, Amazon have had in the last 12 months. But I think that will change. I think when people have the ability to browse, what we notice is when we as a country get more affluent, we don't necessarily buy more of what we already bought. We buy a better quality.
Yeah.
So what you'll find is people will spend more on their food. They'll spend more on their clothes. I won't spend 250, 300, 500 pounds on an Armani or Boss suit because I'm not going to wear a suit. But I might therefore spend more money on clothes from my local shop where I might buy, a nice jumper, some nice shirts. Okay, they might be branded, but I'll pay the local guy down the road here. I'm not paying city centre. So there is going to be a shift, and there's going to be a decline in city centre shops. That will definitely happen. And we're already seeing that. And that was already going to happen.
We were seeing that. I remember quite specifically, we were having a conversation over Twitter as to what John Lewis could be doing differently in order to increase its footfall. And this was way before, you know, COVID-19 had struck. The high street was seeing this anyway, as there was a shift in spending patterns.
And that's my point. You asked me what is happening. These are trends that were happening pre-COVID, but what COVID has done has put them into a pressure cooker, and it's accentuated what was happening positively and the decline, as you say, that was happening previously. So it's forced things to happen faster. So retail is going to be affected. I see the world in the future of talent without boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I'd see that we will have businesses looking for talent, and once they feel comfortable in their leadership style, and that's the thing for me, the revolution that has to take place to accompany this is in management and leadership skills, and we are very, very weak at that in this country. If I could ask Boris to do one thing which I think would transform the United Kingdom's economy, it would be to upskill the leadership skills and management skills. We could almost pass a law. So if you're a doctor, you're not allowed to practice unless you've got a qualification. Mm-hmm. If you're an architect, you can't practice unless you've got a qualification. And yet you can be promoted to a director or a business owner without any qualifications. We have a very bad lack of good management skills in this country. It shocks me. We have a history, and our industry, the recruitment industry, which you were a part of for many years, are one of the worst at it. We promote people based upon their ability to sell rather than their ability to manage. And then when they're promoted, we still don't put them through management training.
No. And
it's just crazy, absolutely crazy. You wouldn't let people drive on a road without having passed a driving test. And yet we let people run £1 million, £2 million businesses with 20, 30 people in them, and they've got no leadership or management skills or whatsoever. And they don't appear to be, but I could accept it if they were then going to go on a 2-year course to learn, but they don't. They just carry on running it badly in a lot of cases. Sorry, that's very terrible. But I do think at times that would massively change the world.
Yeah. And I guess you kind of touched on it slightly then. You spoke about some of the industries that have seen change, more continuous change. And if you were to list 5, so if I was to say, Ian, 5 industries that if you were in right now, you should really start to rethink your decision and rethink that choice and maybe look into reskilling or shifting elsewhere, what would those industries be? And if it's not 5 and it's 4, but they're crucial to say, then by all means.
Well, that's a great question, Sam. There are a lot of industries. Okay, so the trends are that jobs that can be automated, that are rule-based, are likely to be replaced by automation or computers or robots. So let's just go through those. A big one is the warehousing industry. Mm-hmm. Okay, so logistics, picking and packing. I don't think in 10 years' time we'll be employing thousands of people in warehouses to pick and pack goods, that are being stored there. So we're going through this, retail revolution where, there's a shopping at home through websites, through whether it's ASOS or, Boohoo or whatever. We've just talked about them. Those warehouses will be fully automated and there'll be robots moving stuff around. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we are not more than 10 years away for autonomous vehicles driving the roads. So I think at some point, maybe not the big HGVs for a whole raft of social reasons, but the vans around our streets that are coming to our door that are delivering parcels, we may find that they are fully automated. And actually they come up at our front door and a robot comes out, brings the parcel to the front door, and we may all have to have a box sitting outside that allows us to put things into or not. I believe that Amazon are already experimenting with drones that can move parcels. I saw a drone on a video the other day that was moving a box the size of an electrical generator up a mountain. That was a drone. So if it can move something the size of a dishwasher, it almost, begs belief, what are we going to be moving with drones? And they will, you'll have to be able to show that you can land on your front grass or whatever, but I wouldn't want them to damage my lovely bulbs that are coming up like at the moment, my spring bulbs. But they can park anywhere. So that's an industry that those are industries that are going to be affected. Let's do something that's radically different. There are low-end jobs, and when I mean low-end jobs, I'm talking jobs that don't require. So there are 5 human traits that computers are struggling at the moment to master. Mm-hmm. One of which is things like critical thinking, which is where there's no right or wrong answer. So where there is a rules around it, and so you think about it, accountancy is a rules-based profession. Okay, so the basic accounting function, and that is already being automated. I'll give you a personal example. I use a product called Xero, but I'm also an influencer for Sage, and both companies produce software, accounting software now, which is relatively automated. Mm-hmm. If I go back 10 years ago, I used to have an accounting system, which wasn't either of us, I can't remember what it was called now, but I used to have to type in all of the transactions. I used to connect it to all of the people. I then used to have to separate the VAT and everything. And I used to then have to take all of the receipts and put them onto a form and I put them into books. I've actually got them up there. In fact, looking at one now, it starts, well, you only have to keep 5 years, so you won't be surprised. It's 2015 to 16 financial year and this year forward. Actually, they only go up to about 2 years ago. Why? Because 2 years ago, I bought Xero, and Xero allowed me, well, it was great because I got a feed from my bank account. So all of that data that I was having to type in comes straight in, creates a record. And I've now got a tool called HubDoc where I scan my receipts using my iPhone and I just mail them into HubDoc, which is a bit of artificial intelligence. And again, because I'm a creature of habit, I'm a boring man, Sam, so I shop. I always buy my coffees at the same place and the same shops. I buy all my station from the same place. So when I get the receipts coming in, I then fire them into HubDoc. It says, oh yeah, you've bought another coffee from Starbucks again. Great. Well, boom, we'll put that into Xero and that goes into travel and subsistence. Oh yeah, you bought some more stationery from UK Office Direct. So what I now, years ago, my daughter and my children would have taken all those receipts that I had and would have spent best part of 2 or 3 days a quarter coding them in and giving them to my accountant who would do my VAT return. Now that's all fully automated. And that is a basic job that has gone. And so in the world of accountancy, accounting, bookkeeping functions will disappear. But the role of an accountant, the one that has to make those decisions, that's not something a computer can do because there's no right or wrong answer. Sometimes it's an opinion. And the same in the legal profession. The role of a paralegal will start to be automated. And there are already situations where that's happening in London. But the role of a barrister going into court and a solicitor may actually still exist and to become more expert. The same is true in the world of medicine. So in the world of medicine, there are a lot of clinical research where people have to analyze data and tests. And a lot of those things are going to be automated. Mm-hmm. I travel to Sheffield quite regularly, or I used to do before COVID, with a professor from Sheffield University who tells me you can now go into there's now a device which will do a little pinprick on your thumb. You put the blood on there straight into a piece of, or basically a sensor, which is not much more than a USB stick on your computer. That will analyze your blood. And within the next 3 or 5 years, it will be able to identify what are the illnesses you've got. Today, it would identify if I've got COVID or not got COVID. And then diagnostically, they're also here that there's now a patch that you're going to be able to put on the back of your neck, which will be literally able to sense what is going wrong with you, what your blood samples are, what your heart rate is, your blood pressure, and all of that can be communicated. So you'll be walking along and your phone will say to you, you're coming down with a cold, and you won't notice it. And then by about, I don't know, what's the time now? 3:30. By 5 or 6 o'clock, you'll start to feel dry. And by 10 o'clock that night, you'll be feeling really lousy.
Wow.
But I would have known.
Yeah.
So actually, and think about the lives that will save. So those sort of things are going to revolutionize the world of work. But there's a common denominator in all of those jobs, and that is that the jobs that require very little thought, that are repetitive, that are very basic, very fundamental, those jobs are going to be automated, or they're going to disappear. But those jobs where there is no right or wrong answer, where you've got to make a critical decision about someone's health, their business, safety critical things, where it requires judgment, those will continue. Influencing skills, sales skills are very difficult. Maintenance, where you've got somebody going into your loft to fix a leaking tap. It'll be a long time before an android can get in your loft and fix your leaky tap. So those kind of roles will continue, but manufacturing things will, because it's repetitive and it's done in a fixed place with fixed conditions, over time, those are going to disappear. And before everyone starts getting worried, I'd like to share with you something, which is a great photograph, which I will share with you and you can then put it on your website. There's a lovely picture of Fifth Avenue in New York on the Easter Parade in the year 1900. And there is one automobile, and the rest of the vehicles on the road are all carriages with horses. 10 years later, it's the same image shot from the same shot, black and white. Only this time, the road is full of automobiles and one vehicle pulled by a horse. So what we're experiencing, we've been through before. And yes, all those farriers and carriage builders, those businesses disappeared. But guess who are all the car manufacturers? The car manufacturers that existed in the 1900s were all the carriage builders, because the skills you used to building a carriage got transformed into building cars.
Adapt.
Absolutely. And the guys that were the blacksmiths that were putting horseshoes on horses, a number of those became mechanics and set up garages. So people adapt and pivot their business model. So big trend of 2020 was people pivoting their businesses. Guess what? They were doing it 120 years ago when the last industrial revolution happened, and people went from being farriers into garage mechanics.
Do you know, I think you have made me feel very hopeful. So I'm grateful for that. And it's true. We have been here before. It's always hard when you're in it, when you've experienced it for the first time. And I do think in times like this, it's important to look back through history and use that as a reference as to how they've not only survived, but they've pioneered and thrived. And I do feel that is on the horizon for us once we've got through these trying times.
But what's a vlog? We all know what a vlogger is today. But the job title vlogger didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah.
A data scientist, I guess 30 years ago, you could have probably done a bit of a guess as to what a data scientist was. But cybersecurity, did we know what cybersecurity was 30 years ago? These are all jobs that didn't exist, but they're going to exist.
So Ian, I think to end on a really positive note, what can people do to make themselves current?
That's a great question. Well, it's very pertinent, because actually only today in one of the papers I was reading, I think it might have been the Telegraph or the Guardian, I'm not sure which one, there's an article about the education system in the UK and saying that the education system needs to move into the 21st century. And it does, because if you look at the education system that exists today, it's actually Victorian. My grandfather and my great-grandfather learnt the kind of maths and physics and biology and stuff that we learnt, and that needs to change. And we need to move to a world, because everything is, I can't predict what the world's going to be like in 100 years time or 50 years time. What I can tell you is that as a 59-year-old man, I've had to reinvent myself in my 36-year career within recruitment. And I think that comes because what we have to do is we move into a state of continually learning and evolving as the world around us evolves. An example I can give you is, as I was leaving Hayes 10 years ago, somebody said to me, Ian, the world is moving into a different space, and marketing, personal marketing, is going to be really important. We suggest you go and read a book by a guy called, you'll have never heard of him, called Gary Vaynerchuk, called Crush It. So I read this book. It was about personal branding. It was about having a personal brand and standing for something. And I read about it, and it was all about social media and how I could use social media. I'm talking to you today, 10 years on, because I read that book. And because I'm now what's considered to be a global influencer on the world of work and future. I have 27,000 people that follow me on Twitter, and I've got, I don't know how many thousand on LinkedIn. And I write blogs and that are read by hundreds and thousands of people. I put a post out yesterday that's been viewed by 2,500 people. That didn't exist. That was never in my job spec. Bit frightening, Sam, but I'll let you into a confession. When I started in recruitment, the fax machine hadn't even been used in our office. We thought getting a fax machine was going to revolutionize our business. So I've had to continually learn, and everybody will have to continually learn. But there are some positive things. What I would be saying to your children, for example, and your friend's son or daughter that you were talking about a minute ago, is there are certain skills which I think will take a long time for computers to catch up on us. And there are certain qualities that we as humans are better at than anybody else. The first one is caring. You know, we like to be cared by another human being. So the caring professions, whether it be as a therapist, or whether it be somebody working with people in care homes, speech therapists, mental health coordinators, and people doing that sort of work. Then the other thing is emotional intelligence. That's not something that computers are very good at. You know, I'm an NLP master practitioner. I could, work with you for an hour, 2 hours and teach you. Well, actually, I wouldn't be teaching you anything. I'd be making you aware of skills that you already have that you don't even know you use. You know, you will walk into a meeting with a person and there'll be something about that person that you don't like, or you'll make you feel uncomfortable. The difference between me and you with my skills is I can probably explain to you what it is that person is doing that is making you feel uncomfortable. And typically what it is when they communicate and they talk, their body language is what we call incongruent with the words that they're using, which kind of makes you feel uneasy. And you've developed that. And you've learned to read the body language. The first person whose body language you learned to read, and I know this because I know your family background, was your mum's. But not everybody has a mum that they can read their body language from. But we learned to read our mother's body language from around about 3 or 4 weeks afterwards. We read a smile, we know what they're happy is, we know what sad is, and we learn and we go on from there. So that's another skill. The other one is creativeness, is being abject thinking or abstract thinking about something that's totally different, taking an idea that's over here and thinking, how could I apply that over here?
Yeah.
Learning about something from the world of business and applying it in sport, or learning something from the world of medicine and applying it in business. You know, we all hear about these Olympic athletes who suddenly go from what they've learned about how to win a gold medal. So Steve Redgrave, there are various others, and they're now business coaches, because what they're doing is they're taking what they learned in the world of sport and they're applying it in business. That's not something a computer can do because it requires creative thinking. My closest friend is a professional photographer. Photography has been de-skilled because we're all photographers now with these things. But Greg has got more work now than he ever had because people appreciate photography, we're all becoming more discerning because we all know what a good photograph looks like and what a bad one is. I will probably take, if I go anywhere with Greg, I'll probably take 20, 30, maybe 50 photographs. He'll take 10, but his 10 will be perfect. Out of my 50 or 30, I might get 2. And they're probably average by his standard because the lighting is still not perfect. My daughter creates fashion. She's actually working down near you in Brighton at the moment, and she's working on she's done well in lockdown. But that's a skill and an art that we will capitalize on. And people creating new vaccines, creating new medicines. These are all things, and actually I'm really positive about Britain. If you look at the last 120 to 200 years, there was a study by the Japanese a few years ago which asked which nations are responsible for the most of for the inventions of the last 150 years. And sadly for the Japanese, they were only responsible for 3% of the best inventions. I think the French, it was around 7%. I think the Germans, 12%. I think the Americans, it was like 20%. The United Kingdom was responsible for a staggering over 52% of the world's inventions.
Do you know, that's really surprising, because we don't invest heavily in R&D comparatively to a lot of other European countries. So I'm actually really surprised.
But we invent things, we just don't capitalize on them.
Oh, that's a good fact, especially given the current climate.
Yeah. And the reason for that apparently is to do with our education system, which I've just said we need to change. So, we need to make sure we evolve it rather than, destroy it. So those are the sort of things I'd be encouraging, and continuous learning, So there was some study done, I'll leave you with a thought. There was some study done, or two things, by the World Economic Forum. The first thing that they identified is that people with degree qualifications, high-level qualifications, are likely to end up in jobs which are less likely to be automated or disappear. Whereas people who are in low skills, so what we would think of in the United Kingdom as GCSEs, if that's your highest level of qualification, you're likely, unless you improve on that qualification, to end up in jobs that are more likely to be automated. Okay. So the most important thing I would give to your young family would be to get better educated, because that will also help your capacity to learn. And critical thinking is now one of the key skills that universities are teaching their young people when they go to university, and their adults for that matter. Mm-hmm. So that's a critical, important thing. And the thing that I'd like to leave you with is that all children who are in primary schools today are likely to end up in jobs. 75% is the recent figure I've seen. 75% of them are going to end up in jobs that don't even exist today.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Let me give you another thought. How old is your children? I think you've got a young son and a daughter, haven't you?
I do, yes. My son's 11 and my daughter's 10.
Okay, good. I'll give you something to think about. They will probably never learn to drive a car. Think about it. Because in the next 10 years, we'll be buying self-driving vehicles, semi-autonomous vehicles. Why would they ever bother to learn to drive something which they don't need to learn to? That's shocked you. I can tell from the look on your face.
You can. It has.
But don't worry about it, San, because my adult children can drive me to the pub and I can have plenty of drinks, but your semi-autonomous vehicle will be able to do that for you. So you're not going to miss out on being an adult totally free.
No.
I do have a chauffeur, yeah. I have to pay them for it, but
Oh, they should take you. I'm sure you didn't charge them when they couldn't drive.
So I think the one that we should all start with, which is the elephant in the room, is the global experiment with working from home or remote working. It's not that long ago. Literally, it's 12 months ago in the UK, where I was still having conversations with business owners that they didn't agree with remote working. They didn't like it. They could never imagine their business ever doing it. They didn't like the fact that they couldn't monitor and control and see their workers. They didn't like the fact that they didn't know what their employees were doing. And yeah, I think some of those people who we could regard as Luddites in a way have struggled and have actually either had to adopt the new processes, or I regret to say that they are really not in a good place financially, business-wise at the moment. But for the rest, sorry, go on.
Sorry, yes, it's true. It was almost a topic as to whether it was something you would choose to do or not, and whether you believed in the ethos of that workplace or not. And we've obviously been forced into this situation now. So are there any tools? So say we're the company that didn't like this. We didn't believe that companies could be successful having a workforce working remotely. Now, they are forced to do it, and all business owners want to survive and want to thrive. So for that individual who now is running a team remotely, but still struggling, what advice could you give, or what tools could you recommend to help them adapt to this change that is obviously happening, whether they've chosen or wanted it anyway?
I think that's a great question, actually, San. And I think the first thing I would say is, it's not the first place to start is not tools. It is actually a mindset. And business owners have got to shift their leadership skills from measuring people's performance based upon their attendance at work and presenteeism, and as to whether it is to shift them towards output focused working. And there's been a number of business and HR and psychologists who've written reports, papers over the last 5 to 10 years about output focused working, or and one of the things to do is to define with your employees what are the outputs or the outcomes that they are expected to achieve on either a daily, a weekly, or a monthly basis. And if you do that and you agree what you want people to do, and you agree a way of measuring them, then it's up to the employee to deliver what it is they are expected to deliver within that time frame. And if they are doing that, and they are in some ways exceeding what you expect, then the problem goes away, doesn't it? Because, if you're asking me as a, I don't know, and that's assuming, of course, that you can work remotely. I guess that's the first thing to say. If you are a manufacturing plant and you're making cars or aeroplanes or machinery, then that's a little bit more difficult. But if you're in a position where you can work from home, you're an office worker, then that's more than possible. And my first experience of this was actually with a business that you and I were involved with together, and that was Cisco. And I look back very fondly on our trip to Cisco's European or EMEA headquarters down in Bedfont Lakes, which would be now 2 years ago. And you and I remember walking around that building, and this would have been January 2018. And I remember going into one of the rooms, and there was only 75% occupancy of the desks.
Yeah.
And we remember asking people, well, where were the people who sit at these desks? And they were explaining that years ago, people had to come into the office and work at the desk. And now with the technology that Cisco have, that these people are working from home. And as long as they're delivering the deliverables, if they're in marketing, as long as the marketing is hitting the outputs that they want and the timeframes, if they're a tech person and they're running a project, as long as they can attend meetings using Cisco's WebEx, technology, then that was not an issue. And that was at the time something that was relatively uncommon in the world. There were a number of large corporates that were moving that way. But at that time, I remember talking to people, and they estimated that 90% of their workers were not working in a Cisco building anywhere. They were working from home, or they were coming in and what we would now call hot desking, which of course with COVID is a little bit more complex. Yeah. Now, 12 months ago, in January 2020, I attended a conference in London, which was about workplace transformation, and that was run by Cisco. And they were showcasing the transformation of their Singapore office, I think, or yes, definitely Singapore. And they'd redesigned it. So gone at those floors full of almost like battery hen cubicles, quads, as I remember people calling them, where an individual sat and they owned that quad, and everything there had their personal effects around it and their own workstation and everything else. Gone at all of those. In fact, that's probably not true. There maybe have been, 20 in the whole building. Mm-hmm. But next to it were some hot desk places where people could come in and work. And then they had these little pods, which could only be described almost like a desk facing a wall with a large screen in front of it, where the occupant in that room, it's almost like a a one-person room. You could see it on the high street almost as a telephone box, really. And they were sitting in that room having a conference with somebody in another place elsewhere in the world or at home. And there was a big screen. And so they had multiple people on the screen. They'd probably have about 8 or 10 co-workers, like we are doing right now, Sam.
Yes.
And so what has happened in 12 months is the world has accelerated into that place. So that is a trend that's been going for some time. Now, there are some trends that have happened since COVID, which are going to transform the future of our workplace in the United Kingdom and globally. The first thing is that people have learnt that they don't therefore have to travel in and out of a major city every day of the week. So let's take London, for example. You know, I live in rural Cheshire. You've been up here, I seem to remember, a few years ago, and it was a very pleasant time it was. We are about, and you'll remember, by car, we are about 2 hours from the M25. Mm-hmm. We're an hour and a half or an hour and 35 minutes from the mainline train station Crewe to London Euston. Now, there are people, not many, but there are some people who will commute that on a daily basis up and down to London. But in reality, if I only have to go into the office 1 day a week or twice a week, it's quite reasonable for me to live in a beautiful rural place like Cheshire, or on the East Coast in Lincolnshire or South Yorkshire, or, you know, out in the West Country in Wiltshire or Somerset, which are equidistant from London itself. Why does that change the world? Well, because I could be paid a London salary for living in Cheshire. Yeah. And just to give you some facts, the average house price inside the M25, last time I looked, was about £550,000. Mm-hmm. The average house price of the house across the road over there, which is a reasonably large 4-bedroom detached house in rural Cheshire, is about £550,000. So I could sell my house in London, which is a 3-bedroom, semi-detached, maybe, I don't know, Harrow or out in Esher or something like that. Somebody in Esher will tell me you can't get one like that, but anyway. And I can buy that house over there. And I can commute to London. And the schools are 150 yards down the road.
So do you think it gives the opportunity then for people to have a better work-life balance now? Yes. That we have? On the flip side of that, you know, in theory, yes, you could then have a house, a bigger house, have a more wonderful lifestyle. But it also means that there is almost it's very hard to define your 9 to 5, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And there actually has to be some responsibility taken there, because as we're starting to see now, if employers and employees aren't really understanding the value of a 9 to 5 or set hours, you could end up working far more than you would when we were typically in the office at a set time and then out at a set time. And do you think there's any regulations or anything into place to stop that from happening? Or do you think that is something that's happening right now?
Great question. I'm going to give you some very quick answers to those and then we'll delve back into them. So the first answer is, yes, I do think it's happening right now. As a coach, as I said, I'm coaching about 35, 40 business owners right now. One of the hottest topics that I'm dealing with the guys in the US, in Europe, in mainland Europe, that is, and the UK right now, who are directors and senior vice presidents, is what I would call boundaries. Mm-hmm. Boundaries between work and life. Where does the work end? Where does the life, your life begin? And the other challenge is if you work for a global business, you wake up in the morning and Asia and Europe are already working. You're getting messages on your phone. So you literally wake up to messages. You work through the whole European time zone thing. And by the time we get to, what time is it now? It's just after 3 o'clock. I've just finished literally starting at 1:30, a coaching session with a young man who's currently based in New York. Mm-hmm. So we've got people in New York and we've got people, you know, who are starting work in New York, and they'll go on through the evening. California will be coming on stream sometime in the next 40 minutes. It'll be 8 o'clock in California. And I've got guys I coach in San Fran and San Diego. So if I'm an MD of a business, then you've got that time frame. And I know one of the challenges that the Cisco team have that work in marketing that I've interacted with is that in a whole time zone. So you have to create boundaries, and you have to say, I am switching my phone off. Or what I do is I have devices, as we call them nowadays, which have no work telephone numbers or emails on it. So I literally, my work phone stays in my office, my work computer stays in my office, but my iPad, for example, I have, and I use that around the house to read the Daily Telegraph or the Guardian, whichever newspaper I'm reading, and I do my social stuff on a different device. And you have to create those boundaries. Another boundary is your workwear. So I personally dress for work every morning, have done. I'm going to do a commute in a minute. My commute from my office here into the kitchen is probably 10 yards, maybe. But in reality, I'm actually going to finish work when we finish here today, and I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive out into the country, and I'm going to go for an hour walk in the countryside and decompress from my day's work, make a couple of phone calls to some colleagues, and I'm going to walk my son's dog because he and his partner are not in a position to walk their dog because they're working still. And I shall decompress from work. I use it as thinking time, but that's my commute. So I'm replicating my work and creating a boundary. So when I come back home, the other thing I will do after I leave this office is I go upstairs and change into my denim shirt, which I love because it's so relaxing, and my jeans. Or today, because it's night, it's maybe a bit damp, I might put my walking gear on and my walking boots and go walking across. But my point is I change, so there's a boundary. So to answer your question, and mental health is a big thing. And funnily enough, I'm taking my own medicine on that. Tomorrow, I'm doing my mental health first aid course because even as a coach, mental health is now a big issue. And I've come across situations in the last 6 months where I've had to signpost people to some professional help.
And what is a mental health first aid course?
If you yourself may have been on an ordinary first aid course at work, so you know how to do CPR. Okay, well, we now have a situation in the world of work where we have people who are suffering serious issues to do with mental health. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a statistic that I learned the other day, which is shocking. There are more people that die from suicide in the United Kingdom than die from road traffic accidents. That's a frightening statistic. So mental health first aid is about helping to recognize things like, self-harm, people who are depressed, clinical depression, people who are abusing substances, things like that. All of those sorts of things that in the workplace were probably taboo. Mm-hmm. Not many people know this, but nearly 20 years ago, actually over 20 years ago, 98, my father died. And in 2003, I decided that I needed to go and see somebody to put right some of the stuff that happened to me in my childhood. And to put it bluntly, I was emotionally abused as a child, and that left some emotional and mental scars with me. And when my father died, it brought it to the surface. So in 2003, I sought professional help. The reason I'm telling this story is not because I sought professional help, because I went to see my boss, and he was very good, very supportive, very empathetic, said to me, look, Ian, yeah, definitely you need to, you need to go and do this, and I encourage you and support you and help you doing it. But let's not tell HR you don't want to put it on your personnel record. Yeah. And that's the point. 20 years ago, it was a taboo subject. That gentleman was very supportive of me. I completed after 5 years some counselling, and it's radically changed my life. It's why I'm no longer a recruitment sales director, and I'm a business coach. And I thoroughly enjoy it. It's more rewarding what I do now.
There's a lot to be said in that statement just there.
Absolutely. But we're kind of getting off the track here. The first question you asked me was all about what are the trends and things I saw in the future of work. And working from home is one of them, and it brings a whole baggage of other issues. What it also does, though, San, is if we move into that new world where people are working probably a greater percentage of the time from home and nipping in the offices or full time from home, what we're doing is we're stretching the need for people to be within an hour's commute of their office. They can be further.
Yeah.
What that gives is it gives people freedom. I wrote a blog in April last year, for Cisco, which is live on their website, which is freedom for the future of work. And that's what I genuinely believe. I believe we've moved into a world where human beings can now choose where they live and where they work, and they don't necessarily have to make huge compromises. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that if you're a passionate surfer, that you could move to the West Country, to Cornwall, live within, I don't know, a mile or 2 miles of a nice surfing bay on the North Cornish coast, maybe near Newquay, whatever. And if you need to, travel up to London by plane from Newquay or by train from somewhere like Plymouth or Exeter Parkway or Tiverton Parkway. And you can go up to London, I don't know, the 2 or 3 times a week you have to go. Or you could live in the Lake District and catch the train from Oxenholme or Lancaster and be in Euston in 2 hours. And you can do that, an overnight stay, 2 days in London for your meeting, back up to the Lake District. Or you can choose to live where you do, in the beautiful, South Downs, or you can move to, my point being, you can live anywhere. And actually, if you can do that and you can satisfy your boss's need for whatever it is your outcomes are, your outputs are, why can't you move to Spain? Mm-hmm. Why can't you live in France? Why can't you live in a different part of the world? Why can't you move to India or to South America or to Australia? Australia is slightly different because it's literally 12 hours ahead or behind us. So having meetings is difficult, but you get my point.
Will breed an entirely new culture. And then, I mean, that in itself will be fascinating.
Absolutely.
And you now own a company called Talent Futures. Is that right? Could you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. So Talent Futures is a business that we relaunched last year, mainly because I've actually realized in the last few years that where I started my journey 10 years ago and where I've ended up today, I'm not necessarily in the place I was expecting to. And that's often what happens. We're back to evolving on reinventing ourselves. What we're about is literally, as the words say, we're about the future of talent. And whether that be training and developing your staff, whether it's coaching them or whether it's mentoring them, those are the 4 key areas. We also work with some clients who are not in the recruitment space to actually help them identify and attract and recruit their future leaders. And we do that using executive search methodology. So I have a researcher that normally works with key clients to identify the key people in their areas that they're looking to work or operate in, and we go out and recruit people. And all of that is hung together by the fact that ultimately what I am is a growth coach. I work with people to grow themselves and their businesses, and we're in the transformation space. Ultimately, we work with people, we create a goal, an ambition of where they want to be, and we support them on that journey. And as we were discussing earlier, mental health training is one of the things that we've added to our portfolio of solutions in the last 12 months. And in fact, it's one of the fastest growing services that we're providing. We're running every month now a mental health first aid training course. And we've got about 10 to 20 people every month going through the program. And whether you do it through us or whether you do it through somebody else, I would encourage all employers to get themselves a number of mental health first stages in their business. It is, for the reasons we discussed earlier, about working from home, of isolation. It is something that has really come to the fore in the last 12 months. And I think we owe it to our nation, to our people, and as employers to look after our staff and to signpost them towards places where they can get that professional help and assistance.
Thank you so much, Ian. And where could we find that? So I could share the links and sorry.
It's all right. So the website is the www.talent-futures.com. But I would be delighted if somebody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got no problem with connecting with anybody, particularly as long as they just give me a notice to why they're connecting in relation to seeing the video. You will forgive me, but I get about 10 to 20 invitations to connect a week, but often they're people wanting to tell me about SEO and PPC and how to become a global influencer, which I find fascinating. But that's another story. But San, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm delighted to see that you and your family are doing well, and your smile hasn't changed. It's still as fabulous as ever. And I do look forward to seeing you in the future when we can get together and share a large glass of wine.
Absolutely. I really do look forward to that. And thank you for your time today, Ian.
Oh, it's a pleasure. God bless you and to everybody else.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.